Lanternhouse is in Ulverston in Cumbria. Ulverston has a population of 12,000 people. And Lanternhouse is a work in progress. It was not designed to be a presentation space, like a theatre, gallery or museum. It was imagined by its visionary founder, John Fox, as a place for artists to develop ideas and make art. It has accommodation, studio spaces, a multifunctional space we call the barn, a fully equipped kitchen, workshop, amphitheatre and garden. It even has a terrace. Oh God, it has everything. And today, Lanternhouse has reimagined itself as a space that is all about process. It is about supporting artists to research and develop new work and to broker relationships with people, encouraging community participation whenever possible. But the vision is not set in stone. We don't assume it's all there, and we still grapple with fundamental questions. For example, how can an institution be an active agent in the community? How can Lanternhouse support both artists and communities simultaneously? And importantly, do we add value? I suppose what I'm saying is, do we get it right, and can we learn from what we do? Before I get on to answer some of those questions, and you can actually decide whether I do or not, that's not for me, I want to talk about how Lanternhouse came about. This is really important because it would actually be unforgivable not to give credit to Welfare State International as a company that has shaped directly and indirectly much of what we know as participative practice in this country. Welfare State was born in 1968. It was founded by John Fox, Sue Gill and Roger Coleman, with a maverick band of artists, musicians, performers, working together to create large-scale outdoor work. The original idea was to take art out of the gallery, out of the museum and out of the theatre and put it onto the streets. It was big, noisy, blousy stuff, a mixture of vernacular culture and contemporary ideas, bits of folk history with 20th century social and political idealism, creating a blueprint for artists wishing to work with communities or public spaces. And actually you can find out more about Welfare State if you don't know them by Googling them. And there's an archive with the University of Bristol. They have all of the archive material to do with Welfare State. In 1983, Welfare State settled in Ulverston and by 1999 secured National Lottery funding to transform a Victorian school into the arts headquarters that is Lanternhouse. It's the big kind of multicoloured building you see popping up every now and again. And aside, Lanternhouse is named because of the Lanterns procession developed by Welfare State International. Actually, it was an artist called Ali who developed it in the 1980s. And it is a mass participatory arts project with over 700 people making lanterns each year for an audience of thousands for one usually wet or rainy September night. And it's an absolutely extraordinary sight. Last year was my first Lanterns procession. I've only been at Lanternhouse for 21 months. And for 2 weeks, I'd seen young and old coming into our building to make lanterns at the workshops. And in fact, the whole building was covered in these kind of bamboo skeletal structures of animals all over the place. So I was really curious, and I wanted to see whether or not lanterns as a procession kind of held up after over 20 years' existence. That night it did pelt down, got absolutely soaking wet, but it actually didn't stop thousands of people coming into this small market town in Cumbria to see what was an extraordinary sight of hundreds of locals parading handmade extraordinary lanterns. Back to Welfare State. By 2006, John Fox, who had kind of run out of steam a bit, and the company had spawned a large number of other arts organisations operating across the country who had actually picked up a lot of their original ideas and developed them. So John stepped down from Lanternhouse and he's now at a University of Lancaster doing a research fellowship. And Sue Gill continues to do a lot of celebratory and ceremonial art out of Cumbria. So I joined last year in January 2010, and I was faced with an immediate problem, how to reconcile the past and make it relevant for today. And that's not as easy as it sounds, because actually John was a huge myth, a bit of a legend I had to deal with. And there had been a series of other directors from 2006 until my appointment last year. And all of them had failed in terms of dealing with John and his mythic status. And what I found was the community actually divided. There were those who hated Lanternhouse because John had gone, and they absolutely adored him. And then there was another section of the community who actually hated Lanternhouse because they hated John Fox, because they never bought into the welfare state utopian version of things. So really, it wasn't the sweet-smelling, post-hippie wonderland that you might think. And within 7 months, we had done an awful lot. We rebranded the company, we set up a new strategic framework for delivering art, we kind of consolidated and really thought about what our vision and aims were. And we set ourselves some goals and some objectives, all terribly organisational, isn't it? But really it's all about the art. But what we did was we took the founding principles of welfare state and reworked them for today. So today, Lanternhouse is a place for artists to research, develop work, be a place for artists to develop, to engage with people and communities, and a place for artists to make work for non-institutional spaces, for outdoors, site-specific, and actually anything and anywhere they fancy. And I really wanted to make Lanternhouse non-hierarchical, to be a place for everyone. It was really important to me that it had to be a democratic space where many diverse groups could feel ownership on equal terms. And that means giving credit and placing value on art and culture produced by people. And I mean doing away with hierarchical position about the artist and art, as if the artist is superior, when clearly artists live in this world, watch television, listen to pop, read books, and do everything that we do. So, because otherwise, how else could artists make art that taps into the important stuff about our lives? And actually, artists have always played with pop culture, used it, referenced it in some way. And one of the really interesting books for me is Bettina Funk's Pop or Populace, which has a whole series of essays about the relationship and the interplay between artists, popular culture, high art, and mass-produced cultural output. It's a really great book. So what I'm suggesting is that we recognise the relationship between artists and communities, art and the vernacular, and recognise and celebrate its difference as well as the interplay of the two. To actually move away from the old attitude of top-down educating people about art, and because actually one of my pet hates is I find some of that stuff a bit kind of missionary, you know? Sometimes I'll tell you stories some other time, but I find some of that a bit problematic because it doesn't recognise the cultural value of things that other people are making and doing. And actually, to replace all of that top-down stuff with ideas of engagement, discussion, disagreement and cooperation, really to have a conversation, and a conversation a great number of artists are already interested in. In 2009, I went to San Francisco to see the Rudolph Freeling exhibition at SF MoMA called The Art of Participation. I had a massive jet lag the entire 3 days I was there, so it could have affected my perception of the exhibition. But what I was really struck by was the energy and the broad range of practice in that show, and that it gave a narrative to a lot of different artists working at different times and in different contexts. So back to Lanternhouse. I really wanted to do away with the them and us, the thing that had sprung up around Lanternhouse. And I wanted Lanternhouse to be embedded in the community, and for the community to feel a sense of ownership for everything, not just for the lanterns procession. And that's how we created Open Door. But before I go on to Open Door, I need to say that our programme, we have 3 programme strands. We have the residencies for R&D, we have the commissions, where that's commissioning, and then the third thing is Open Door. And the idea of the structure is it's flat, that if you come in as an artist to do research and development, we can actually pick up your proposal and turn it into a commission, or we can pick up your proposal and turn it into an Open Door event, and vice versa. An artist who we've invited to commission might actually, because they've worked with this, decide that they want to work with the communities through the Open Door programme, or that they actually, out of their commission, have decided there's another piece of research that they need to do. You get the picture. So Open Door, the third strand, best represents the idea as an institution acting in a democratic way. It allows us to gift the building to community groups, voluntary and amateur art societies to use it in any way they feel. So twice a week, we are taken over by about 6 groups, and it's on rotation. And those groups want to use Lanternhouse to meet, make, share skills, do whatever they want to do. They include knitters, weavers, spinners, drummers, printmakers, local bands. There's even a philosophy group. There's loads of them. I can't remember all of them. The drummers are made up of local men and women. Some of them are farmhands, some are mechanics, some are professional musicians. The knitters are mainly young women, and the weavers and spinners are mainly older ladies. And when those 2 groups are in the building together, what you see is a transference of ideas. So the older ladies will then teach the younger ladies how to spin wool. Very Rumpelstiltskin stuff goes on in there. And our artists and residents actually love Open Door. That's what we found. That we've had some fantastic collisions and collaborations due to artists and communities sharing the same building. For example, digital artist Will Scrimshaw was on a research residency and had been gathering environmental data through a series of walks that he'd been doing in the landscape. But he was really struggling and he didn't know how to visualise it. Until he popped down into the kitchen where the knitters were, and he started talking to them. I think Soul's because they're quite good looking as well. But the conversation resulted in him asking the knitters to knit data, which they did, so that was his problem solved. He actually got the knitters to knit binary code. And another time we had Rebecca Joy Sharp, who's a poet and a composer and a harpist, and she was doing a research and development residency for us, who was really curious about Open Door, would actually come down every week and see what was going on. And what she did was she asked the printmakers to teach her how to make prints. And what I love about that story or that illustration is the fact that it upended the normal role of an artist teaching people something. So Open Door allowed artists to be taught by community members, and it was just beautiful. And for me, both of those examples demonstrate Lanternhouse's aim of creating a social and natural place for interaction and engagement, people doing things on their own terms. Of course, we're not an open source institution, and the democracy we aim for has its limits. There is still a decision-making process headed up by the organisation, and we select artists we work with, and we select the commissions and projects we undertake. So when I say Lanternhouse is a democratic space, I don't mean everyone has the right to determine everything we do. Democracy, as in real life, is limited or is constrained by consensus, very often, should be, ideally. And anyway, disagreement is good. Max Meeson writes in his book, The Nightmare of Participation, that the very idea of participation suggests conflict. That to engage in something means you have to wander into someone else's territory, knowingly, and it requires careful negotiation. To illustrate that good conflict, I want to talk about Brennan and Sperandio's Profound Colours. In February last year, we commissioned the artists Brennan and Sperandio to do something with us without a brief. We just said, this is Ulverston, this is us, just tell us what you want to do. What we did want, and why we selected them, is we wanted to work with artists who would break with the welfare state notion of spectacle and the kind of more theatrical end of art that welfare state had been known for. So we knew we were going to do something that some people would kind of go, well, that's not what we expect. What we did get was Profound Colours. It was a mass participatory work engaging over 1,000 people from Ulverston, condensed into a book without words. A 5,000 print run of images representing the mundane, the profound and the amusing stories told us in visual colourways was then distributed in town. The book, in essence, represented the emotional temperature of the town. The project took 8 months from start to finish, was accompanied by talks, workshops, tea parties, film screenings, and all manner of activities aimed at a broad audience, and it still caused a kerfuffle. And we wrapped it up. The debate and disagreement about what art is and what its value is eventually generated discussions between people. Their voice was heard and we acknowledged opinions without necessarily agreeing with them. The fact that 1,000 people took part in the project, over 800 people took part in the workshops, and 5,000 other people received the book was neither here nor there. We were having a conversation with the community. And Profound Colours allowed us to build an honest relationship with lots of different people. Some folks said they'd never stepped foot in the building, started to come in to things that they like, and then they tell us when they don't like things, and then they stay away, and that's absolutely fine, because we actually respect their decision not to like everything we do. And I suppose what I'm saying is, Lanternhouse or the Cumbrian audiences, like most places in the UK, are vocal, chippy, opinionated, and that's how it should be. We don't want docile consumers, we want people who are going to participate. And the next project we just finished in October this year was with 2 artists called Timon and Rushton. Kind of illustrates what I mean. The artists were invited to take up an R&D residency, and then we transformed it into a commission. They wanted to make work that explored ideas of community, civil disobedience and nature as espoused by Henry Thoreau, the 19th century American philosopher, writer and early environmental activist. This resulted in The Good Life. It was a 2-part project. We had a recreation of Thoreau's cabin, which we sited in Mightydale Forest up in Eskdale in the north of the county, which would be home for a series of artist residencies, and then the stage, which we put slap bang in the middle of our barn, which was a social sculpture, and it was to be used by artists and local people. The project allowed us to engage with villagers in remote Eskdale and deepen our relationship with a myriad of local groups in South Lakes. It also characterised a blurring by who was a participant and who's not, who's active, who's not. Because normally we call a participant a non-artist. We use that term to describe a non-artist. It's a member of a public or someone from a specific special interest community. The Good Life changed that as Timon and Rushton wanted us to invite artists to take up residency in the cabin, thereby completing the work and making them participate in the whole social sculptural experience. And the same idea was repeated on the stage. Mainly local groups and arts organisations. For example, we have the Lake District Summer Music, who are quite sort of stuffy, classical, tinkly piano playing people. They actually performed on the stage. And other times we had the amateur musicians making up Berners folk tradition. And we had a lot of artists' talks on the stage. So The Good Life caused arguments between audience members had talked some rip-roaring, fantastic discussions, and it also allowed Eskdale villagers to make their own art. It kind of provoked them to make their own art, write their own poetry, and it energised people to think about all sorts of things. And I just want to wrap up now by saying that I think Timon and Rushton created a polyphonic community when they produced The Good Life. It had different types of participation with a wide variety of people. It was successful because Hyman and Rushton valued working with people and engineered social and cultural activism within their work. It created a communal conversation that was political and inclusive and social. And that's pretty much what I want for Lanternhouse. We set our aims and realised we had to build in organisational learning, and that's achieved by listening to artists and public. It means that we have to adapt our organisational systems to keep Lantern relevant. And we change our relationships all the time. We helped set up a group called the Cumbria Women's Multicultural Network as a writing group, and devised a lot of workshops with them. This year they came to us and said they didn't want that anymore, they wanted to go it alone, and they wanted to devise projects and then come to us and ask us if we would be partners with them. And we took that as an absolute major sign of success, that in a way it means that that group were taking ownership of themselves and of their right to develop their own programmes in the same way that happens 20 odd years ago with the Lanterns procession. And so the value of working together for us is kind of soppy, but it means you don't go it alone. You've got lots and lots of people around you who you're having lots and lots of different conversations with. And that's really important when the future for the arts is really difficult and a bit scary right now, and there's so many changes afoot.